This is me, Travis Jones. I'm with, my company is a little company in Dallas called Smart Roof and Home Performance. Just me and a couple other folks. We're pretty niche in the stuff that we do. RCAT is our state licensing organization, but it's a voluntary license. Texas does not, we have very few licenses in Texas. We have plumbing, electrical, HVAC, and irrigation. So you gotta have a license to put in sprinkler system, but not to build a house or put on a roof or many other things. So there's roughly 15,000 estimated roofing contractors in Texas, and 350 of us have the voluntary license. So it's kind of the Wild West where we come from. How many of you is roofing licensed in your state? So, yeah, how many actually have roofing licenses in your state versus it's just not a licensed trade?
Well, they have to have a home improvement license.
Have to have some kind of license? Okay.
They have to have a building license, but they can do anything.
Okay.
Bathrooms, kitchens.
Yeah. So how many, like, there's no regulation at all, it's just kind of, you know, in roofing? Gotcha. I'm also a fortified roof installer. We're gonna talk about what that means. I do duct and envelope tightness testing, blower door testing, duct blaster testing, home performance, and then I lead our local BS and Beer chapter. If you're into BS or beer, if there's a BS and Beer chapter near you, I recommend it. It's basically a group of guys and gals that get together who are interested in building better, want to talk about building science over a beer. We just do a lot of cool networking, and we'll have it's a monthly event for us, have a speaker. So that's who we are. 2 QR codes for you. If you're on Instagram and you're interested in that kind of thing, I post stuff about roofing, ventilation. So I do that. That's the QR code on the left. The QR code on the right goes to some links that I have, and this whole presentation I'm going to do is available there. So if someone will check that for me, it should be available. I uploaded it to Google Drive as a PDF and linked it, so if someone would verify it, I want to make sure you have access to that. And then I'm going to add, there's a couple things I'll hit later that are not at that link yet, but I'll hopefully later put on there if it's a helpful resource for y'all. All right, y'all got that? Everyone got it? Okay. All right, so course overview. We're here basically to equip home inspectors to identify roofing and ventilation practices that impact long-term performance. With a focus on fortified roof standards, you'll learn how to recognize installation shortcuts, evaluate attic ventilation, and understand what distinguishes a resilient roof from a typical one. You'll be able to identify components of a fortified roof, compare common installation deficiencies, explain how fortified details improve resilience to wind, hail, and water, describe the process of being a certified fortified evaluator, and then demonstrate a working knowledge of attic ventilation and how to evaluate it. So just to tease that second to last point, fortified is a standard. I'll get into the history of it in a little bit, but in order for someone to get a roof that's certified as a fortified roof, they need a fortified contractor and they need a fortified evaluator, third party that they pay to make sure I do my job. And so, especially in a state like Texas where there's no mandatory license and really very little accountability, the only thing I've ever gotten, most people don't pull permits for re-roofs, we do, but the only thing I've ever gotten red tagged for is we didn't put our dump receipt with the permit. That's really the only thing the inspectors are checking. Did you dispose of the shingles properly? So this is a peace of mind thing for homeowners to say, hey, you can not only get a roof that's installed to a better standard, you can get it verified by a third party. And this, to me, this goes so well with the skill set you guys already have, something worth considering, and we'll get into that. Why roofing resilience matters, I like to just say simply, you know, and when I teach on this to other roofers, sometimes I use a principle of like zoom out, zoom in, zoom in, zoom out. So the zoom out is, what's a roof's real job? It's not to look pretty. Your roof's primary job is to keep the water out. The other elements too, but the water is the #1 destroyer of buildings. That's your roof's job. If it's not keeping the water out, it's not doing its job. It doesn't matter how pretty it is, right? And then a good inspector, whether that's certified home inspectors, whether that's me doing roof inspections, we don't just spot defects. We stay curious Asking why something failed helps you better explain the risk and recommendation for further evaluation. And so I want to just encourage this field detective mindset. You're gathering clues, not necessarily making assumptions, staying curious to not just what's going on, but why. As much as we can get to the why behind the what, I think is so valuable. Here's just an example I'll tease, and then we'll kind of work through this a different way. But so searching for clues. So what the red arrow is pointing to back there is what I don't think it's a technical term, but it's what I always call a dead valley. You have a valley with basically a wall coming up. You're asking a lot of that valley in terms of shedding water. And so just seeing that, when you see a dead valley, that's a place you want to get eyes or at least a drone on, because that's often a place where we have problems. Or if you can't, get inside, get thermal, get a moisture meter. This is a likely leak spot, right? These roof wall connections, And then the other thing I think about, if you heard the concept, how you do anything is how you do everything. So the roofer that didn't put a kick-out flashing there, like you see it, the front door is behind the archway, but you're walking up, you can immediately see this 4-year-old roof didn't have kick-out flashings. So that tells me something about the roofing crew that did the job, right? So that's what I found in that dead valley. 4 years old. Anytime you see that much caulking, right? Caulking is not a strategy, right? It's like your last resort. Look at the staining from the moisture. Look at the rust. You can tell a lot of water's challenged this area. That's what it looks like on the other side, which is when we got called. We can't figure it out. Well, here's what's going on. So we started pulling it back. First, 2 layers, synthetic over asphalt felt, so the roofer before didn't tear down to the deck. No leak barrier installed in the valley at all. Or, there's no peel and stick, which is what we always do there. And then you can just see I love this. Can you see? Yeah, slide down. If only they put it in Spanish. Oh, it is. Never mind. All right, again, the roof's job is to keep the water out. So let's get into what I thought I would go through first is just what I call these roof failure hotspots, so that as you're inspecting roofs, and these are probably, a lot of these things hopefully are very familiar to you, but maybe I can add some additional insight. And then interactive, if you've got questions, comments, you disagree, let's have a conversation and hopefully learn from each other today, okay? So we're gonna go through those failure points. So roofing penetrations and attachments, so plumbing boots, heat vents, brackets. So there's some penetrations. So you can see the far left, obviously just a worn out plumbing boot, water's getting in there. The next picture, that's my parents' house. And that product is called the Bullet Boot. And we have a lot of trees and a lot of squirrels. And so we'd had lead pipe jacks before that they loved the lead. They chewed on it. And at the roofing show, the Bullet Boot people were like, oh, squirrels won't eat these. I was like, well, I guess they like that one. Look at that heat vent. What's going on there? Why is it rusty?
Condensation from the water heater, or is it corrosive?
Yeah, so there's the top side and then the bottom side. Why do you think there's condensation? It's not tall enough, you said? It's not, what'd you say? Not insulated? Yeah, I mean, it's so. Yeah, and this is what I see this so often on the left here, or I'm sorry, on the right. This was the pipe at one point, and then they did a furnace swap, and now they're with 4-inch B-vent, and instead of saying, Mr. Homeowner, we want to swap this out, but we need to put a different roof penetration to make it really function right, they just adapted it, and it's like, oh, well, condensing gas can go from smaller to bigger, that's fine. theoretically, except that vent doesn't do it that way. If you've ever, I've taken one of these apart, the clearance is tiny, and it's constricting these combustion gases, and so you're gonna get condensation. So whenever I see this, I know, this is an HVAC issue that we can kind of solve, especially if we're re-roofing a house. I'm always gonna point this out and say, hey, this is the time, let's go ahead and take B-vent all the way through. In this case, this was a house that I inspected for a buyer after the home inspector had called out a few things. Didn't call this out in particular, but it called out a few things, and I said, let's change that. After they bought the house, we fixed that for them. So that's roof penetrations. Here's attachments. So this is the same. So look at that satellite dish. You can kind of see the beginnings of it, and then, isn't that yummy? This roof belonged to a friend of mine, and I said, and he had 4 of these little anchor points and this sail, and I said, Roland, congratulations. He was on the ground. He goes, why? I said, you picked the worst possible spot on the roof to attach this. What are you doing, man? So I look at all the tar. He would just, I just get up there every year or two, and I was like, well, there you go. There's a strategy. And then this was resting on there. We were redoing this roof, but pergolas don't need to sit on roofs. They make brackets for that, but again, that guy, he costs more. All right, so let's talk about flashing. Roof-to-wall connections, especially, such a vulnerable spot on a roof. Dormers, second story, skylights, chimneys, and then kick-out and transition flashings. So, one of the clues that I look for, and can help a homeowner understand, and it kind of tells me more about the roof as a whole, this is flashing on a chimney, and what do you notice about that? Rust. Yeah, multiple holes. Is this the first roof that used this flashing? No, and we do a lot of insurance re-roofs, and in Texas you have to be careful because you have to decide if you're wearing your contractor hat or your public adjuster hat. So, and they have a law against public adjusting, so we have to be careful how we even talk to the insurance companies. But I'd say, if I'm re-roofing this house, does the code allow me to reuse this flashing? And the answer is it doesn't, because you cannot reuse damaged or rusted flashing. So that shouldn't have been reused to begin with, but it was. It's pretty typical. What's missing here? Isn't that nuts? And then this is a transition flashing. You don't see these a lot, but this is and this didn't exist before we re-roofed the house, but at a much higher spot on this house, that's where they had all their wind damage. So we put in a transition flashing here for that pitch change. And then what's missing behind the chimney? A cricket. And there was no ice and water. Basically this pan flashing just was sitting on top of that felt. And the first way the guy knew there was damage is enough water, that's a wide enough chimney, enough water would back up, go under the shingles that over time were no longer sealed, and get underneath that flashing, and it was running down the front of his chimney.
Sorry, I think it's missing a bit more than kick-off flashing. I think gutters there too will help, because that's an area where one roof is pouring onto the other. So that's why these...
A lot of water challenging that area, for sure.
Yeah, it's not splashing.
Yeah, especially the staining above here too. But yes, but was there kick-out flashing? No, and yes, exactly. So and that's a great thing to point out. It's like, what is our strategy for water management? Because that's the first job, is to get the water down and out, and that clearly wasn't doing that. This is a hidden spot, a little bit of a dead valley here, but look at the bottom of that siding. What's going on there? Yeah, no gap, right? All that just wicks moisture up. Now, I don't know. That's not caulked. And then it's trapping here. It's literally just, it's just gross. And some people are like, oh, well, I have cement board siding, so it won't do that. Oh yeah, it'll do that too. It'll do that. It's porous. It'll suck up that water. This skylight. So here's the back side of the pan, and then as I got a little closer, That's actually the top of that. So they were getting water, and there was a lot of roof line above it, so it's just water coming down and getting over that. So, again, these are such critical areas to point out for people, flashing failures, essentially. All right, valleys, hips, and ridges. Hip and ridge shingles, I mean, it's very vulnerable to wind, right? And in a lot of markets, I know in mine, people still are using 3-tab shingles for hip and ridge. They buy a bundle of 3-tab, and they cut it, and that's their new ridge cap. Instead of buying an actual ridge shingle, which is made to go on the ridges, and they will warranty up to 110 miles an hour depending on the manufacturer and the nailing pattern. 3-tab, who knows what like the typical wind warranty for a 3-tab shingle is, even just installed on the field of a roof? 85, it's lower. There may be some at 70, but often it's 60 mile per hour. So there will be roofers, and I know this because my suppliers will tell me stories. They're like, oh yeah, there's guys, they will order a class 4 architectural shingle for the field, which some of those are warranted to 130 mile per hour wind, and then they'll put 3-tab on the ridges. Doesn't make any sense, right?
They use the architectural ones on the ridge also.
I've seen that. That looks ridiculous. Valleys, see lots of water. Think like water. That's part of, when you're on a roof, where's the water going to go? And if we think like water, where's it going to challenge? You should have valley liner. That can be hard to identify without destructive testing, depending on how they've done it. So sometimes you can tell, sometimes you can't. But here's a couple pictures. I mean, there's just a bunch of footfall, and why? If you can't tell, this is a very steep roof. So that becomes the traffic. That's how anybody that's working on the roof or inspecting the roof or whatever, they're like, oh, let's keep going there. It's like wearing a trail, through the woods or something. These are 2 different houses that had, architectural shingles and 3-tab for hip and ridge. It's really hard to tell. There are ridge cap shingles that look kind of like cut 3-tab. The only way that I sort of try to tell is see how this one has this angle? They don't have the same, the edges aren't the same. And it'd be really hard to tell without kind of manipulating a little bit. You kind of can, but does that make sense? You see this? You can kind of see where some of the cuts don't line up sometimes, but more than anything, it's just something to be aware of, especially if it's common in your market. One of the simple ways, and it's one of those things, I don't know if you all were in the podcast, but we were talking about the whole stay in your lane idea, or don't stay in your lane. Like, let's push, who else is going to advocate for your client, And so do you guys ask, hey, and maybe this is more the realtor's job, but do you ask, is this roof, does it have a manufacturer warranty? Did y'all ever ask about that? Is that something that's kind of on your radar to ask if there's manufacturer warranty?
Well, I ask them to get any information they can from
Yeah.
the seller, especially if it's newer. They're usually pretty happy to share that because it's a selling point.
Yeah.
In the house, but
The main benefit of the manufacturer warranties is they all require you to use their systems. So you're typically going to get, if it's, doesn't matter who it is, Owens Corning, or I do a lot of ICO shingles or GAF, Certainty, if you're going to register that warranty, it's usually the shingle plus 4 accessories. So maybe they used, which they don't have to use the ridge, but it's starter, ice and water shield, felt, ridge cap, and some will be like the shingle plus 3 accessories. So it just depends. But if it has a registered shingle warranty, there's a better chance they've got actual ridge cap and not 3-tab. But I mean, look, this at least you could see that the felt was lapped over. Here, the felt's not even lapped over this hip, and it's just wide open. And this was all over this roof. And this was the only damage to the roof after a windstorm, was the hip and ridge. Yeah.
I saw a roofer doing that. Is there any reason you would want to not take your paper over that?
No.
Because I called it out. I was like,
Yeah.
this makes no sense. You lose your shingles, at least you have.
Correct. Yeah. No, the manufacturer's instructions, all talk about you have to lap it, whether it's 6 inches, 12 inches over, and they just didn't do it here. Yeah, I mean, unless you're cutting into ridge vent. Sure. Yes, back there. So he's asking what's the easiest way to tell the difference between a cut 3-tab and a ridge shingle. It's really hard. What I try to do is, if it's a ridge shingle, and usually, they're loose enough on the edges, you can kind of pull them up a little bit and see. If you look at 4 or 5 of them and both sides of the ridge shingle look the same, it's more likely ridge shingle. Because if it's 3-tab, you're going to start to see, oh, there's that little, like you can almost tell, here's your 3 tabs. Between these 2 tabs, there's a little arch here. Between these 2 tabs, there's a little arch here. And you're kind of studying it, you can tell, oh, and this doesn't have that. So you can sort of see the discrepancy even in one shingle, that one has a little bit of a curve and one is straight. That's typically going to be a 3-tab that's cut. They come in pieces that you break, but they look the same still if you put them all next to each other. And then the higher, when it's the higher profile ridge, that's pretty obvious if it's like a Z ridge or, those kind of, or the bullnose ridge cap, you can tell those. But the ones that it's a toss-up, you do have to kind of look closely. And again, that's even hard for us to do, and we see it all the time. But, it's great, something to help people be aware of. Yes, yeah. They're thicker, and they do make ridge cap that's impact rated and not impact rated, but, so class 3 or class 4 versus standard. They're a little bit thicker, but yeah. It's really hard to tell just with the thickness between a 3-tab and just say a standard regular, ridge cap. So that's a little bit of a challenge, yeah, for sure.
Slightly more pliable?
Yeah, they're a little more pliable, and they have their sealant strip is in a different spot. I mean, but it does kind of vary from one brand to the next, but it's just different than 3-tab. And I didn't mention this, but like sometimes in our market, people will use 3-tab for starter as well, and then you can also see that. They'll turn it upside down, and you can see that the sealant strip is like a dashed line as opposed to a solid line of sealant, which is starter shingles all have that solid line of sealant versus the dashed line. So you can kind of tell that, at an eave. All right, eave details. We're going to get into this a little bit more with Fortified, but I had some, it's one of those, this is your standard detail where your underlayment goes over the drip edge at the eave and under the drip edge at the rake, because it's all about water flow. This is an example that's closer to actually what Fortified does. Here you have ice and water going not only to the edge of the sheathing, but down the fascia a little bit. And then you have your drip edge. And then here's flashing tape applied over the drip edge so that water can't get between the ice and water shield and the drip edge. We'll look more at that when we do the Fortified details. All right, ventilation and exhaust. So I'm going to do, in the section 4, we're going to do a deep dive in just attic ventilation. But I want to talk for a minute about exhaust fans. Obviously should be properly vented through the roof. Through the soffit's okay too, as long as it has the right connection. But I see this all the time in remodels, older homes. They just vent right into the attic. They put in bath fans going right into the attic. And then is the right roof vent being used? A lot of times they'll take 4 like 3-inch bath fans and just stick it into one hole and mastic around it and stick a turtle vent on top. I'd rather do a dampered vent up there. I think that's better, but there you go. Oops. If only they put a sign on these that said, remove screen if used for dryer. Oh yeah, they did. This person my son's friend had me come over and look at their roof, and the roof was fine, and I was like, I saw this, and she was actually running a load of clothes at the time, and I pulled it out, and whoo, it was nice, got a little warm. And I said, have you had issues with your dryer? She goes, we have to clean that thing out all the time. I said, I bet you're going to dry clothes a lot faster now. Because this same vent that's used for bathroom exhaust fans and dryers, if they're not thinking about what they're doing, they're not taking that screen out and they're blocking that dryer. Or here was a bath fan hard to see, but there's the exhaust just going right in there. And this all used to be white. No, I'm kidding. That's old insulation. But once I moved the insulation aside and we fixed that, it was kind of nasty down there too. All right, in the field, here's the way I think about what's your likely damage to field shingles. I mean, certainly if there's marring from like a tree branch or something like that. But a lot of field shingle true failures that aren't related to ventilation, but field shingle failures happen related to nailing, especially as you get steeper. And I'll show you a great picture of that, of what the shim portion is, and it's slipping out on a mansard roof. And then looking for damage to field, by other trades. So let's look at that. So here on the left, two-story house. What do you think? Look at these little dots. Any guesses as to what that is? Not nail pops. What is it?
For the cleat, where they nailed the cleat, safety cleat on, and they just pulled them off.
Yep. It's where they nailed however they were accessing the siding, the paint, whatever they were doing above there. They just nailed into the shingles, and then they pulled it out and put in some MP1 and called it a day. It did not leak for 10 years. And 10 years into it, this guy started getting leaks everywhere, and I found these all over his roof. So I had a guy that was doing a stucco chimney for us recently, and we were talking about it. He goes, "Oh no, I'll nail in and I'll put seal on." I said, No. I said, "Look, here's what I'd rather you do. Break the seal on the shingle, because you can put your ladder accessories under there and nail in under the shingle." And I said, "Try not to damage it. I'd rather replace the shingle later, but maybe I don't need to. Maybe I can just reseal that shingle. At least I'm not going to have holes, because, again, that sealant is a temporary solution. So that's something to keep an eye out for." So this is what I'm talking about on, this is terrible on, mansard roofs for sure, which is what this is, but even, anything above a 10, 12, you start to see this. You sometimes see it on others, but what is happening here is that the manufacturer instructions can be a little fuzzy sometimes. That they will always say on a mansard roof, you need 6 nails per shingle. They will always say you need to hand seal it. So 4 quarter size, beads of sealant underneath it. What they don't make fully clear sometimes is, and you need to nail this shingle at the common bond. Do y'all know that term? So the way that a laminated shingle like this is made is that rectangular portion, this called the shim, is laminated to the portion above it that has the teeth, and also usually this piece that you're seeing goes up underneath there, right? So it's like that whole shingle is usually like 13 inches or so like this, and they're laminated together. A lot of these shingles are getting to where they're giving the roofers a great nailing zone that's an inch wide, even 1.5 inches wide, and they tell you, just get it in the nailing zone. But not on a mansard. Now you have to nail it at the common bond, which is like a very, very narrow. It's probably, less than 1/4 of an inch is the common bond. So it's very hard to do it. And this was a roof. Before I started my own company in 2022, I was working for a guy. This is one of the roofs I did for him, and his crew, and I've pulled these shingles up and looked at it. There's a weird line on there that they got off on. It just confused them, and I understand, but we've gone back. This poor guy, Steve, has sent me 25 pictures like this over the last 4 years. And he's so patient. The roof crew, I was like, guys, seal the whole, just do it all. Just re-nail the roof, because that's what you have to do. But that's why you're getting those. And sometimes you see that a lot at the eaves too. And it's certain shingles just delaminate. The real solution is to nail it at the common bond. All right. I'm not going to say much about specialty roofs other than my mentor, Jim Rogers, would just say, tile roofs leak, period. They're only as good as their underlayment. So a lot of the non-asphalt type of roof, metal, tile, you just assume it's going to leak. So your underlayment, your flashing details, that's everything. And then the outer layer is just protecting all of that, right? So I'm not saying that's easy to evaluate, But just being alert, if someone has a specialty roof like that, if you're kind of alert to signs from the inside of water damage and maybe in more than one spot, it's like maybe the details they didn't get right. So here's an example, and these tiles, you can see they basically hang them on these battens, and the path for water, you can see it right here, right? They left a little gap for water to get out if water ever gets under there. But what do you think? Next to the wall, you think water's getting under there? Yeah, a lot. So these were really leaky roofs. This was a part of a multifamily project that we were inspecting. But bottom line is, it'll be hard to inspect, but the underlayment is important, and that's where it's like the craftsmanship. What kind of warranty do they have? Whatever you can discern, even about, say, visible flashing details might tell you a lot about what potentially is going on underneath. All right. We'll get into the fortified section here. Any questions real quick before we move on? Is there anything common, roof failure type stuff that you feel like you see a lot that you're like, okay, that I didn't mention that you want to share? Awesome. All right. Fortified, my man. Yes, sir. Got your fortified hat. I like it. How many of you have heard of fortified roof? Okay. The new fortified standard was published earlier this year, kind of supposed to be fully enforced in November. I'll explain kind of what that means. But we're going to talk about fortified roof. Just a little bit of context. This is an interesting slide, the impact of extreme weather, that since 1980, and this ends like, this data is from like July 2022, so this number went up for 2022. But in that span of time, 330 plus separate billion-dollar weather and climate disasters. But this is including drought, wildfire, flooding, winter storms, and then severe storm count, which includes hail, high wind, tropical cyclone count, so hurricanes. So in that time, of those billion-dollar weather disasters, how many do you think what percentage hurricane or severe storm versus wildfire, drought, flood? What do y'all think? 23? How many 23 percenters I got in here? Raise your hand. You think 23%? All right. How many think 55%? 68%? And you're right, 68%. It's a lot, right? A lot of damage from those storms. So can we build a better roof? Are we just, it's weather's happening and whether it's getting, for whatever reason, it does seem to cycle and maybe it's getting worse. Are we just doomed to have to keep replacing roofs all the time, or can we build something better? Well, this facility is in South Carolina, about 30 minutes south of Charlotte, North Carolina. That fan, so look at the size of that door. That's a door for a human. That's a 6-foot in diameter fan. 105 of these can generate Category 3 hurricane winds inside that facility back there. So there's some really cool videos. IBHS.org, you can look at them on YouTube. They have great videos of building buildings and destroying them. And so it's a nonprofit research facility, uses extreme testing to find better construction practices for more resilient buildings, and that's where the Fortified program came from. Now, the funding for this nonprofit, anyone want to guess who is paying for all this research? Yeah, absolutely. It's the insurance and reinsurance companies who are like, help, save us money, help, mitigate our losses. And it's not just, a loss is not an either or. It's not did you have a loss or not have a loss. It's how severe. If you can keep the water out of the attic and you just, there's a big difference between needing a re-roof and needing to move out of your house so that you can have water mitigation and mold remediation and have your kitchen and living room rebuilt, right? The difference in cost is extreme, plus just the impact it has on the people and how it disrupts their lives. So that's what this program is about. I'm simplifying this for you, that when I think, what is a fortified roof? It's really about these two big ideas, a better attachment and a better seal. Better attachment meaning, and I'm gonna say re-nail, my mind always goes, you can do this with a brand new roof, but because we're doing it all the time on re-roofing, so if you see that's where that comes from. But we tear down to the deck, which is already puts us in rare company in Dallas-Fort Worth, where we've removed like 7 layers of felt paper before. And I've talked to guys who've removed a lot more than that. But it's very common that we're removing 2 or 3 layers of felt, meaning the last 2 to 3 roofers just didn't even tear down to the deck to inspect to see what was going on. So we tear all that off. We re-nail the deck every 4 inches with a ring shank nail. We nail the drip edge every 4 inches. We nail the felt every 6 inches at the laps. And I've got pictures. I'll go through this again with the photos, but 12 inches in the field, and then we put 6 nails in every shingle. We seal the roof deck, seal the edges, and then it's verified by a third-party evaluator. So let's look at that in detail. These are photos from what we had to send in to get submitted to get the fortified certification. Yes, sir?
Do you have order homes that have the dimensional decking, the 1x6, and then if they do you take that off or just put new sheathing?
If they have 1x6, it can't have a gap. The gap has to be like an 1/8 inch. So it's just a tighter,
So
yeah.
saying
You can do it, yeah.
So you're allowed to put your shingles on as long as they're an 1/8 inch or less?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can get away with 1/4 inch though. They say 1/8, but
Yeah.
I've gotten approved with 1/4 because you have the shingle manufacturers saying that they allow up to 1/4 inch.
There you go. Yes, sir.
With that
Yeah.
letter attached to my file with that roof, they will allow that.
Okay.
Up to 1/4.
And where are you in here? Are you in Louisiana? Yeah. So
And we do have a lot of dimension along those
2 years ago, when was the big,
items.
the funding for Fortified, the grant program? Wasn't that like
Started 2 years ago.
2 years ago? Yeah, they 30 million, Louisiana Department of Insurance came up with this program, and other states are doing this to, fortify Louisiana, bring the insurance companies back because they're all chicken. I won't say the other part, right? So they've left, and they're like, one of the ways that Louisiana got insurers back was by this fortified program, $30 million, $10,000 per person, and I think that money was accounted for like in.
They got about, they just gave out 300, and then they gave out another 500. So they're pretty much dwindling down to almost giving all of the grants away.
Yeah, so it's.
The 30 million.
So it's growing, this thing is growing in popularity. Okay, here's the details. So I just put the chalk mark so that the person in the Philippines that's reviewing my pictures can see it. I'm not kidding. Nail rafters every 4 inches with ring shank nails. Why? Again, they tested this in the facility, and then they've gone back and looked at it after the fact and said, what makes a difference? This doubles the uplift strength of the deck. So, if a hurricane hits Dallas, we're all in trouble. So we don't get hurricanes. We're a little too far north, but we do get a lot of tornadoes. Got a hurricane? Golly. Just head for high ground, y'all. But, we get tornadoes. And so I say, Mr. Homeowner, if I put a fortified roof on your house and a tornado hits your house directly, thoughts and prayers, my friend. I can't help you. If a tornado hits you directly, we can't save that house. But what Fortified, their vision is to shrink the path of devastation of the tornado. And you can imagine if you double the uplift strength, whether it's a tornado or a high wind, I've seen microbursts of wind do weird stuff to houses. Like literally 2 houses got affected and nothing else. One, all the shingles were ripped off the front. The house I was working on, it picked up his mod bit roof, maybe 80 feet by 10, and folded it over like a tortilla. Boom, and it was crazy. I mean, we get these bursts of stuff. So doubling the uplift strength of the roof deck, that sounds like a good idea. Then we seal the roof deck, keeps out 95% of the water if the shingles fail. So let me paint a picture for you. If, let's say you have open seams on your roof deck and wind comes along, it tears off your roof deck, tears off your even your felt paper, and now it's just you have your deck exposed. No ceiling. For every 1 inch of rain that hits your roof, it's like 9 bathtubs full of water being poured into your attic. That's a lot of water. That can do a lot of damage. We can keep out 95% of that just by taping the seams. So, and there's a couple other, this is the 2-step way to get to a sealed roof deck. So, oh, the Valley's gonna have ice and water shield in there. Yeah, yeah. We did this first, and then for the true sealed roof deck, we tape the seams, and then here is synthetic underlayment, 6 inches at the laps. So that's a lot of cap nails, and then 12 inches in the field. So that's method 1. Method 2 would be ice and water shield over the entire roof. And then method 3 would be you actually, and this sounds weird, you're like, that doesn't sound right, but they've tested it, is that even if you don't tape the seams, if you will do this detail but do double layer, meaning you put on your first course of felt, and you could technically cut it in half, but whether you do that or not, and then you come down again and you start over, and like this felt is 40 inches wide. Instead of overlapping it every 3 inches, you overlap it every 20. You come halfway down, and then you can imagine the number of cap nails that are holding all of that felt down. That accomplishes the same thing as the sealed roof deck. What do you guys do?
Mostly ice and water. Well, for the grant program, it has to be ice and water.
Oh, does it? Okay.
It has to have a bond right now, meaning you have to put that.
Yeah.
But you don't have to nail it like that.
Yeah.
Just tack it in place,
Yeah.
with this ice.
Yeah, that's why I've avoided the ice and water thing. The bond break is so annoying, but I get it.
People like the double felt. To me, that you're putting way too many nails in that roof.
Yeah.
Start with the decking with all of those button tabs plus the roof nails. I'm not a fan of double felt. Ice and water's the best, but good luck getting that off on a re-roof.
Yeah.
We haven't ran into how they're gonna do that next, because if we haven't gotten that far with this yet. But
Well, the thing is, and the point, what he's talking about,
seams is,
yeah,
I guess is okay. I mean, if I had my own roof to do, I'd probably do a tape seam, because my decking is fairly new, and
yeah.
I don't know how you're gonna get that. Well, some manufacturers will allow you to go over they ice and water too, though. So you gotta kind of,
Yeah, I mean, the code allows 2 layers of ice and water, so you could, he's talking about a bond break, which means if you did all ice and water, then before you put your shingles, you would put just a layer of 15-pound felt. So if you had to re-roof, so now the shingles don't seal to the ice and water, so that you can remove, when it's time to re-roof, you get kind of one more roof out of it, is the idea. All right. 2-inch, so minimum 2-inch drip edge on the deck, but you can go 3, 4, more is always better there. Full 2 inches. Well, it has to do with how far past the sheathing, right?
well, it's half-inch down.
Yeah.
It's amazing, half-inch. Which,
Well, it's a half inch, isn't it a half inch past wherever the sheeting is?
it's a half-inch down the fascia and 2 inches up the slope.
Yeah. So we're 2 inches. So we're 2 inches at the slope, but you don't get this at the big box store, and a lot of the suppliers weren't carrying this drip edge. We were having a metal shop make it, but now we have some suppliers that are carrying a full 26 gauge drip edge. It's just the stuff you get at the big box store is like 32 gauge. You could tie it in a knot. I mean, so this is just a really sturdy deal.
A lot of suppliers are gearing up, and a lot of manufacturers are putting fortified on the product itself now.
Right,
Where
yeah.
you don't have no guessing. You know that it says fortified. I know it meets the 226 type 2 felt paper.
Sure.
There's certain codes that they want you to have.
Yeah.
And if they putting on there fortified, so the sort of suppliers are making it easier for the roofers
Right.
to come in and buy the stuff that they need before they put it on and it fails.
Yeah, so we're seeing I'm seeing a lot more manufacturers are saying, oh, you do fortified with, I've been doing fortified with ICO for a while because they developed their warranties around fortified 5 years ago, but GAF, they're the largest in North America. They came out with a big fortified program this past year at the IRE, Owens Corning, all of them are now saying it. And then there's other ancillary companies that are making all the products. And why would that matter if you were a fortified evaluator? Not only are you making sure you have pictures of all of these steps, you have to make sure you have pictures of all of the materials and that they Again, it's not your job to make sure they meet it, but to make sure that the person deciding whether this passes as a fortified roof has all of the right materials. And so just by having more that are labeled as fortified helps that process. Here, you know, we looked earlier that, you know, normally at the eave you want your underlayment on top, but for fortified, it goes underneath. This is a little extra step we do. We like to tape the front deck and then go down the fascia, just because sometimes that gap can vary between the decking and the fascia. It's just a place where we get lots of leaks. And then if you were up north, you would put, you know, your ice and water all the way down underneath here as well. And then this is the starter that we use. This is like a double-sided peel and stick starter that ICO makes, which I really like. So it sticks down to that. The whole deal, the reason you can put your underlayment under the drip edge is because your starter is either a self-adhering starter or you can use a regular starter embedded in asphalt cement. But the idea is that water is never going to get under the drip edge, and you don't have to have the top side peel and stick, but that's why one of the reasons I like ICOs, it's peel and stick on the top. So you can imagine at that eave, you have this like monolithic bond, and there's just no way, very difficult for wind to lift it, for water to get underneath there. And then we 6-nail the shingles for maximum wind protection. And then I thought this was really interesting. Here's what this is talking about. And if you came in late, I'm going to put a QR code up at the end, and you can download this whole presentation. The University of Alabama's Center for Risk and Insurance did a study for homes impacted by Hurricane Sally. So they're really looking at coastal Florida and Alabama, where the code is already basically a fortified roof. The difference is, well, and so two important thoughts. One, they said if every home had a fortified roof, it would have dropped losses by $147 million, saving homeowners $42 million, insurers $105 million. But this is a huge thing, and this is where I thought this would be a great topic for you guys, knowing that we're going to need more fortified evaluators as this program grows. The verified installation made a difference. So homes with a fortified designation perform nearly 40% better than those built to similar construction standards without the documentation and third-party review. So think about it. In theory, the same roof, but if you had a third-party evaluator, if you had some accountability, right? I can never find the source of this. Lots of motivational guys have used this quote, but I love saying, you don't get what you expect, you only get what you inspect. And so the inspection matters, the accountability matters, and it matters to the tune of 40% better in this particular study. And, you know, I think that's a pretty cool idea. All right. I'm going to go through this quickly because we're here really to talk about the roofing stuff, but I want you to just know about it. So there's the fortified roof, silver, gold. Roof is addressing the roof deck, sealed roof deck, drip edge and flashing, the roof cover, the attic ventilation, and solar. That's all kind of covered under the roof and those attachments. But then silver adds windows, skylights, entry doors, garage doors, gable end walls, overhangs, chimneys, attached structures. So that's a fortified silver. And then fortified gold is the whole house. It's really the fortified home. So now you're, really it's this continuous load path. And they say, they have a spec for, just like I have to use an 8D ring shank nail in the decking for my deck, there are standards depending on what type of framing you have for how you're going to have a continuous load path from the ridge beam all the way down to the foundation. Things about the structural wall sheathing and then the design pressure. So that's part of the fortified gold. This is more new construction, right? But all of the programs make a difference. And really, even though gold in some of the studies, I don't have a slide for this, but in some of the studies where, gold performed really well, homes that just had the fortified roof weren't that far behind gold. Now, if you're building a forever family home, I ask my high-end builders around me all the time, why aren't you doing this? You're close already. Just do this. It just makes sense. But yeah, there are definite insurance discounts for all of it. But yeah.
They won't even write new policies
Yeah.
But if you have a gold house, they'll write you a new State Farm original policy, that's it.
Oh, wow.
But I'm doing a neighborhood now with 150 gold houses, and the realtors are gonna be asked more and more, hey, where can I find a fortified house?
Yeah.
And you're gonna start to build to that standard, if not, you're gonna get left behind,
Yeah.
because it's just the way it's going, you know?
Back here.
I'm from Indiana, and this is, obviously way above what we do.
Yeah.
I mean, way above. If, I've got metal and bar metal, so, whatever. But what are we looking at price-wise between just standard and adding this stuff on? I mean,
Yeah.
materials, you're not looking at all that much, it doesn't sound like, but I would imagine labor's probably gonna be a little bit more.
Yeah.
You have a
Yeah, I mean, so I'll give you some ballpark numbers. So like when I want to sell a retail roof, if I'm going to do, and I'm not at the bottom. I'm not interested in, the race to the bottom, they can all have that. So my basic price for re-roof is $600 a square for off and on back with asphalt. But I'm doing a class 3 shingle. I'm doing all the fortified edge details. If you want fortified, I have to bump you up to a class 4 shingle, which is a big part of the cost. Because the hail piece is a supplement. Like, you don't need the hail piece if you're in Galveston, Texas, on the coast. But in Dallas, Fort Worth, why would you do it without the hail supplement? So it depends on where you are. And I think I have a map of that. Wait, there we go. So, you've got green is like the high wind zone. Here's the hail zone, and then here's the hurricane zone. So, if you're in this hurricane zone, you don't need the class 4 shingle, but we charge $725 a square, so it's $125 a square additional, and that's, like my crew, it's taken me a while to develop a crew that'll do it. I think they charge me $40 a square on top of what they normally do. But it's one of those things where while I was here, my operations guy texted me. He goes, hey, he was at a networking event. He goes, this other roofing company, they sold their first fortified roof, and they got certified, but they're not sure what to do next. How do you feel about us sending them our, Marcos's phone number? And I go, send him the number. I mean, they sold the roof. He's not my competition. I don't care. I want him to do it right. I want Fortified Program to have a good name. And send him my evaluator too. And if they want us to I've invited roofers to come to my installs because I'm a big believer in a rising tide raises all boats. So, I'm not threatened by people doing great work. I need more people doing great work because what's going to happen over time, if I could get more DFW roofers bought in on this program, the cost would come down because it wouldn't be as scary to the crews, and it is scary. And I don't mean that to be like condescending. They've done something the same way for a long time. It's muscle memory, how they hammer in those cap nails. And I'm saying, oh no, I want you to put one every 6 inches. And they're like, they look at me like I'm crazy, which I am. But, so the more the merrier. Let's keep doing it because I think there will never be too many people doing great work. But does that answer your question? Okay. So you get the certificate. It's transferable between homeowners, whereas like shingle warranties are usually transferable once, but once it's certified, that roof is a fortified roof, and then it needs to be redesignated after 5 years. So if you're thinking about being a fortified evaluator, they want to make sure that somebody didn't do something like my friend Roland and attach a sail in the valley, because that would not be allowed, right, in fortified. So they want to check it, which is smart. And to me, all that's going to do, it may sound a little like red tape, but I think it's going to add validity to the program. And again, it's a voluntary program. So I love that. All right. That's it on that. What time is it? Okay, that's about an hour. Do y'all want to take a break? Do you want to keep going and get out earlier? What would you rather do? Keep going? Y'all ready? Okay, everybody stand up just for a second, though. Just shake your legs a little bit. Yeah. So, how you doing? What?
Carlos.
Carlos?
Yep.
Mark. Good to meet you guys, man. Thanks for coming.
Mark, good to see you again.
Yeah. All right, go say hi to one person next to you. And then you can have a seat. And if you're sneaking out, we know where you're going. No. Yeah, with metal. Yeah. I mean, it can be done with a.
I managed some rental property.
Yeah.
And we put one on, and I don't know if the guy just didn't do it well, or
Yeah.
I mean, it's like vertical, so I mean,
Yeah.
I get it, like the smallest wind.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to take that weight, but I have some other properties that are like a similar style, and I'm wondering if like fiber cement boards or patent and like.
Man, I mean, yeah. If you get in, as you get into specialty roofs, those do pretty well. I like, you know what I've had the most success as I used. It is a designer shingle, but like GAF slate line, which is not a laminate, but it's pretty heavy. That's been a great shingle for that. But I think if you do, well, you got to 6-nail it, you got to hand seal it. Were you here when I showed that? Yeah. So, but you have to, if it's laminated, you have to nail it where the two pieces come together, and it's very narrow. That's the problem, is they're missing that nailing strip. I think a shingle like, for if you're doing value, like Owens Corning's Duration shingle would be great for it. Just make sure they hit that common bond.
Yeah. I mean, it's not much with the surface area. It's
Yeah.
Like it's got a flat roof.
Yeah.
And it's just like the little balcony there.
Yeah.
So it is an expensive product.
Where are you? What?
Here.
Okay. Yeah, or, I mean, honestly, the other thing, GAF, they'll warranty theirs too. I mean, if you find a Master Elite GAF guy, and just make sure it's like, hey, I want you to nail it right, but, you know, if it fails, they usually stand behind it pretty well. So that's kind of what I would do.
They just had this done. They did TPO on the top.
Yeah.
And then I don't remember if it was 3 tab or if it was asphalt.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're like, you guys just made it different.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was the insulation or just the design.
It's tough, you know, depending on the shingle too. I mean, it's kind of tough. The worst part about that shingle, that was the shingle the guy I was working for at the time installed, and it was a shingle called Pabco, which is out of the Northwest. They brag about being the heaviest shingle on the market. Like, actually, that's what's going against it. It's too heavy. So it's like, you know, yeah. Mansards are. There's some crews that just won't install them. They're scared of them. So, yeah. Anyway. All right, y'all ready to? Let's keep going. We'll keep rolling. All right, so I want to talk about attic ventilation because other than sort of these obvious leak issues that we were talking about kind of in the first pass, this is where I see so many failures, and not just roof failures, but failures that end up impacting the health of the home, the air quality of the home, that lead to issues like, I'm going to use the word, mold in an attic, okay? So the question is, if you, as an inspector, if you suspect there's an attic ventilation problem, what do you do? And oftentimes we recommend evaluation by a qualified roofer, and I'm saying that word qualified is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that phrase because in DFW, I never re-roof a house where the ventilation was done right. It's always wrong, which means nobody before me has asked I'm like, how is this possible that no one's asking? And sometimes it's only a little wrong, but it's usually a lot wrong. So asking, oh, is it fine? They're like, you know, 1, 2, 3, yeah, you're good. I mean, like, how do you know? So we're gonna get into that. And so what I wanna give you guys is just kind of some ways to think about, kind of a checklist, how to think about attic ventilation. So let's dig into that. Oh, I put that in the wrong spot. Here we go. Why it matters. Ventilation is about heat and humidity. And, you know, in some climates, the heat's more of an issue. In some, it's the humidity. But excess heat can damage asphalt shingles, can drive up energy costs. It can also, it can void manufacturer warranties. So if, I don't know if I have I think I have a slide on that. hit that in a minute about blistering shingles. But excess attic moisture creates risk for condensation, and it just creates an environment for biological growth and pests, right? Humid attic. So that's why ventilation matters. All right, here I'm going to give you some steps. So first, surface and attic clues. Look for physical signs. Blistered or curling shingles, biological growth, whether it's mold or otherwise on the sheathing, and rusted nails. And here's some pictures. Okay, so this right here in Dallas-Fort Worth is what a rookie roofing guy calls hail, but it's not hail damage. See the sharp edges around that little circle? And then here, it's harder to see. This one, you're seeing mainly the asphalt in that blister. These white, if you let your eyes adjust, you see kind of all these little white specks. What is that? In the granulose, and we're past the asphalt. Now we're looking at fiberglass mat. Now sometimes you'll see little white specks in the asphalt, and that's just limestone, but this is fiberglass mat. These are blistered shingles. It doesn't only happen when there's attic ventilation problems, but that's one of the main reasons it does. But if you have a manufacturer's warranty and you have this all over your roof, we just had one we replaced that had this is from that, I had lots and lots of pictures. This was one of the pictures I sent to the manufacturer. They paid for the whole roof to be replaced because they admitted it was blistered, 5-year-old roof, and I was able to show it had adequate attic ventilation. If it did not, that's their reason that's their get out of jail free card. So attic ventilation is huge when it comes to getting that manufacturer to pay for a warranty claim. Ooh, look at that, rust and black nasty, right? Okay. And then here, we don't like the color of that. It's really hard to see this in this picture. I was trying to bump up the contrast, but there's water dripping from these nails. Okay, so this is a picture. It was pretty warm. It was March or April, but it was already pretty warm. This was in December, and it was pretty cold, but it was rainy cold, so the humidity is actually pretty high, even though it's cold, right? And so these were both condensation issues in these attics. What's that?
What kind of roof did they have? Turbines, ridged?
So this roof had whirlybirds, turbines, and this had ridge vent. But I'm going to show you why both of them were, I've got later pictures why they had issues. But these are just clues. So if you're in an attic, if you see rusted nails, how did it rust? I mean, maybe if you see a rusted nail, there's a leak. But if you see rusted nails, it's more likely it's condensation. And if it's condensation, you're thinking ventilation, right? And yeah, same here. If you get up there and you're fortunate enough to smell that musty smell and then get water dripping on you from the nails, you know there's a ventilation problem. So that's step one is, when I go back over the steps at the end. All right, verify both, might sound funny, but verify both intake and exhaust are present. There's times when I found intake with no exhaust and exhaust but no intake. Here's some examples. So this house, there's other issues here, but ridge vent, these are just like dome vents. They're not power vents, although sometimes, you know, from the attic, from the roof side, you can't necessarily tell. Well, there were no, well, these are all passive, so not too bad. There was zero soffit, none. In fact, in the attic, I couldn't find the picture of this. They'd put all the baffles in, but put in solid soffit. And I asked them, this house is 21 years old. This was the second roof that had been on it. It was a 12-year-old roof, and it looked terrible. And I was like, what is happening to this roof? Well, no attic ventilation at all. But the clue, and we'll talk about mixed ventilation in a minute, but one of the clues, if you see different kinds of ventilation, that's another clue that something's up. Why did they start adding ventilation? Why was the original strategy not working? And if they started adding ventilation, did they do it right? Did they ask, do we have intake? Clearly not. right? Why are we adding exhaust when we have zero intake? Here, I tried to bump up the contrast on this. It doesn't work. I'm just looking up at, this is a vented soffit, okay? You can't see it, but it is. This is vented soffit, and there was zero exhaust. 4-year-old remodel, and so this is the vents we're marking to put back in, but there was zero exhaust. They had lots of moisture issues. So the first simple check is there intake? Yes. Is there exhaust? Yes. Great, we've passed that hurdle, right? Are there visual signs? And do we have intake and exhaust present? Next, go,
Sorry, quick question.
sure.
That picture you had there, so the roof has a vented soffit, but you're putting in the domes.
Yes. Yeah.
Why would you choose the domes over a ridge vent?
I like, if you look at how much air actually moves with these, and I'll show you the calculator, you can get more done, more ventilation from these than from a ridge vent. Based on the, and we'll get into how we calculate that, yeah.
Power vent or just a dome?
No, just a dome.
So wouldn't a turbine be pulling more than than domes?
Yeah, it would.
It would, huh?
Yeah, turbine would.
So this is right here.
Here?
Yes, sir. So if you got no venting on the soffit,
Yeah.
then you're short cycle. You pulling in,
Oh, sure.
on the air that's going right out there.
Yeah,
You're not cooling off from the screen.
right.
That's why you blister.
Yeah. All right, then we want to identify the exhaust type, passive, active, or both. Shouldn't do that because one is really relying on stack effect and the other's relying on airflow, right? So if it's a passive vent, there's no moving parts. You just have soffit and you have a dome vent, a ridge vent. What you're really counting on to move that air is stack effect, temperature difference from up here to down here, and that causes a pressure difference, and it's really the pressure difference that causes the movement. Wind does a little bit of that as well, so it's stack effect plus wind, but when you have a turbine or a powered vent, you get that powered airflow. So just knowing what am I looking at passive or active? Those are the two, that's the next step. So there you go. There's passive and there's active, okay? There's some turbines.
Well, I do have a concern with the turbine vents. They can tend to create negative pressure in the attic. So if you're pulling more than you're able to supply, you're going to be pulling something from the house
Yep.
or something else. Number two, something I've also questioned, and this is coming from the code book for us in Canada, is that ridge vents, one thing people do not account for is it says unobstructed airflow. Most of the time, there's
Yeah.
always mesh in there or something. So if you do your math, if it's 1 in 300 or 1 in 150, you find that even if you lined up that whole ridge, you're still not meeting up. So I was going to buttress your point to say I would usually prefer the roof jack vents.
Yeah.
When you look around, those things have unobstructed airflow compared to ridge vents that always tends to slow down.
Yeah. So a couple points, and we'll come back to your negative pressure thing about turbines because it's a good discussion, and we'll have that at a later slide. But the other point is he said ridge vent, you'll say it needs unobstructed airflow. So ridge vent has this rating for how much air should go through it. But oftentimes we've added a mesh or something for bugs, and the air's not moving as freely through it as you would think, which means you just need a lot more ridge.
Block with felt paper, not cut wide enough.
Yeah, so you can run into some issues there if it's obstructed. Okay, so then this is mixed, identify if there's mixed exhaust, the short cycling we were talking about. So here's mixed exhaust, ridge vent, turbine, right next to each other, pulling. So, the wind starts this moving around, and where's it going to pull the air from? Well, the path of least resistance. So maybe it's pulling it from here. It's doing kind of a short cycling thing. What do you see wrong with is there anything additional that's wrong when you look at that picture? Yeah. Yep. Gable vent, ridge vent, and turbine. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with the gable vent? Yeah, this is where it helps to know your market well and kind of what the history of building and kind of what was going on. Houses like this was a house that was originally wood shakes. And so the original roof assembly had 1x4s gapped, and then the wood shakes were, it wasn't just underlay, it was like interlayment. You'd put down felt and shakes and felt and shakes. That whole assembly could breathe. And then you pop a couple little gable vents on the end, get a little wind through there, and it did fine. Then we said, oh, it's too fire hazard, let's get rid of all the wood shakes, let's tear them all off, let's put solid sheathing, and now let's put an asphalt shingle. So now this whole assembly that used to breathe does not. And they're like, oh, but it's getting too hot, what do we do? Well, let's put turbines up there. But this house has such short overhangs, there's no way to even get a soffit vent in there. So there's nowhere to pull the air from. And so the way it kind of went in my market is we would go from gable to adding turbines, and then roofers were like, ridge vent, it's the latest, greatest thing. We're going to do ridge vent. And so I promise you, when this house was re-roofed at one point, they had turbines, and they just replaced the turbines and added ridge vent, not understanding that all of this is just not causing the air from down here to flow.
These guys have a peculiar problem because they have a half story, so they don't have a full attic. So to me, this is also already a design problem. Because you see everything straight
Yeah.
all the way down through the living spaces. So how much of attic space do you have? So I don't even see how enough air is going to move from that soffit all the way down to that above and ceiling all the way up. So I think these guys, this is the drill.
Yeah, he's talking about the design problems. It reminds me, my mentor, another thing he would say with homeowners, they'd be like, well, what do you think? And he would say, well, you got a match? Like, maybe you just need to burn this thing down and start over. Yes? Inline vent? Yeah, we'll talk about those. I'm going to get to those in a minute. All right. And then also incorrect height. So passive vents installed mid-roof really interrupt the airflow. Active vents might be okay. Mid-roof, if the intake's correct, iffy, but let me show you what I'm talking about. So here, ridge vent way up here. There's ridge vent. There's ridge vent. Every ridge on this house has ridge vent on it somewhere. And all you're doing is just poking. It's like, I call it like poking holes in the side of a straw. You're just poking holes. And then they have these two little, see those little, that's the intake. And they just popped a couple of those in. What's wild, the way that they're rated, these, for every 4 feet of ridge vent, that's a 4-foot intake. For every 4 feet of ridge vent, you need 2 of those. Those are kind of meant to mirror the two sides. So a 4-foot ridge, 4 foot of that. And so I go through neighborhoods all the time that just have, a few of these little, that's called deck air, just like dotted throughout the roof. It's just, it's not getting the job done as far as intake. So you've got this interrupted airflow. On this house, it depends on, there could be a few different factors, but here, I noticed when I was inspecting, before we re-roofed this house, which is here, like these would be spinning and these almost would never spin. And even with a little bit of wind, let's just put it all up at the same height, even though it's further away. And man, those things all move together. So it's ideal if you have active, if you can get your ventilation at the same height, that's ideal. Now, a few slides back, I showed this little oblong vent here. We've just started using these. It's a really cool product, Roof iVent. And Pavel, who's the Czech engineer, we talk about stuff a lot, and he's like, and he would be fine with me doing he was like, oh, Travis, no, it is fine, you understand. I built this with very much, aerodynamics and, stuff. So I've followed his advice and have started putting these a little bit further apart, and we've gotten great results. So he swears it's part of his aerodynamic design and whatever, and so far we're seeing good results. But generally speaking, you want your exhaust at the top, and the only exception, not with passive vents, but with active vents, as long as, and these don't pull like equivalent of a the CFM that these pull is not huge, so they're very strategic. There's ways to make that work. Again, that's really getting in the weeds, and I'm not expecting you to. That's called a roof I-vent. They make a whole suite of products.
Do you prefer it as well because it's a smaller penetration through the roof, or do you have any concerns with the size of the vent, like those larger?
I do, well, so I do like those vents because it's a two-piece vent that is a smaller hole, and he also built like a condensation drain in the middle of it. So he's just thought through all of the engineering of it. So I like that. And it's also, if you're gonna get condensation, you're more likely to get it on metal than on plastic. So that's what I've been installing a lot of, and I like that a lot. All right, here's something that hopefully this will be a good tool for you. Does the intake match the exhaust? If a roof looks like it has enough exhaust, the problem is often not enough intake. So I made this chart. I'll put it up where my QR code is. Later, I have a longer one, and there's a couple. These are all passive vents, okay? But I wanted you to get a picture of, all of these have a rating, okay, for NFA, net free area, or NFVA, net free ventilated area. And they're expressed in square inches of air. Basically, here's how many square inches these things move. So for every one of these little, this is a Lemanco 750 that's rated for 50 NFA. These little 4-inch by 16-inch soffits are rated at 25. So for every one of these, you need 2 of these. The deck air, that big, long 4-foot, is rated for 36 NFA. So you always round up. So that's 72 for 50. Ridge vent. Now we need 3 of these, but 2 of these. A dome, this is not powered. Now we need 6 of these for every dome, but this moves more air, 144 CFM versus 50 versus 18 per foot, 72. So 50, 72, 144. Does that make sense? So you're needing more as you get more air. Now let's look at active. This is where I see so many mistakes is, hey, all right, there's a 12-inch Lemanco turbine. Needs a lot more intake. Needs a lot more of this deck air. And this is why I don't like powered vents. Because the powered vent, I've never seen them where they've accounted for enough intake. And again, they're trying to solve a simple problem. They're leaving Costco and some guys selling solar powered vents, and they're like, oh, that's what I need. It's like, do you have enough intake? And even on their website, it was very hard to find how much, like they say it, but it's buried to find out how many soffit vents they need. Because if they admitted that, they'd have a real marketing problem. It's like, you have nowhere near enough intake to install, our powered vent. Yeah.
Common in our area with older homes with the gable vent to find a powered gable fan, on one of those vents. Do you see a discrepancy in how much air it's moving that the other gable's not going to be able to allow enough through?
So I would, conceptually, it depends on how much volume of air and like how much, how big that gable vent is. But I think if you had it, I think there's a way it could be sized right, and it does make a lot of sense to kind of just pull it through this way, as long as you don't have. But then your gable vent's your strategy, not the top.
Exactly. It's just, you see a lot of mix.
Yeah, I think it could work. Here's the reason I would not do that strategy as a roofer is, let's pretend for a minute that we have enough intake, and that when this kicks on, as I told a guy at a trade show, he's like, oh, register to win one of these. And I said, I would never install that. He goes, why not? I said, well, that thing pulls a lot. And he goes, oh, it's variable speed. I go, okay. But how do you know if it's not pulling from the house? He goes, well, it's variable speed. I said, well, you didn't answer the question. How does it know the difference between pulling air from in your house and from your soffit? I was like, does it actually know? And he couldn't answer. Well, I've never thought about that. So I think you have a problem of pulling air from inside the house too. Sure. But let's pretend it was right. Let's pretend you did everything right and this strategy worked. When does it stop working? When did that happen, Mr. Homeowner? How long is that? Are you sure? Like, but how many homeowners have I said, oh, do you know your power vents don't work anymore? They're like, oh, I didn't know. They never know. They don't know. So to me, it doesn't make sense to set someone up with a strategy that when it fails, they don't know it fails, right?
That's what I had with the swirly birch fans. You know, I don't like them, but maybe because we're up north,
Yeah.
Maryland, because we have, you know, ice, snow, and
Right.
we get rusty, and often they just don't spin or they'll squeal pretty bad.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I do like the roof I-vent, and he's solved that. And I mean, this is a guy that, you know, he's based out of Chicago now, and he's really trying to create a technology there that really works. So I feel like that active vent sometimes, because of how, for me, we have a lot of really complicated roofs in Texas, hip roofs and all these different elevations, and I feel like that the passive vents just don't, it's just really hard to get enough air moving through those. And so I've been successful with those, and I think they are rated for snow and ice, and so anyway, it's something to look into. Did I have a hand over here somewhere? Okay. Oh yeah, well, okay, we'll check that. All right, now, next, is intake working? Look for the painted, or, you know, oh, I got soffit vents. What if they're all painted shut, okay? Look for the baffles in the attic, and then the light test. So, I'm not telling anyone to do anything unsafe, so if anyone's with OSHA. Go in your attic. Obviously, you know, you're not going to use their light. You've got your light, so you're safe. You get to a spot where you're safe, and you turn your light off, and you look. And that's one of the ways you can see, if you're seeing light, that's one way. You can do it the opposite. You could turn the light on, and then from the outside, look up and see. It doesn't work for every, but it's just another way to verify, do I have an actual working intake? Because if it's not working, then you're not ventilating.
Usually it's jammed with insulation.
Oftentimes is. So here was this was, you know, here's an example, you know, painted soffit. This was that moldy deck on the right. He had ridge vent, but he had the soffit vents were all, they were painted shut and had insulation all in them. And then here's just a detail. Obviously, you know, if you have a soffit vent, you got to have a way to protect it, you know, a baffle to protect it against the insulation, right? All right, so just again as these steps, are there physical signs? Blistering, mold, rusted nails. Do they actually have both intake and exhaust? It's crazy to me the roofs I've been on that don't have, I mean, you know, recent homes that were custom homes, and they just didn't put any exhaust. Nobody checked. Is exhaust active, passive, mixed, or same height? Does the intake match the exhaust? Which is, I think, a great way for you guys to really conceptualize, you know, the issue and maybe bring some value to say, hey, you know, you have a power vent and you have like 6 soffit vents. You know, that's not enough, you know, to provide what that vent is going to need, or the whirlybirds, whatnot. And then is the intake actually working? And then finally, just looking at, hey, how much ventilation do you need? And that's where I laugh. You know, a qualified roofer should be doing this. We talked about this term, net-free ventilation areas, NFVA or NFA, 1 square foot for every 150 square feet of attic, or for every 300. So let me just show you that. All right. Here, this is one that I did, calculating some ventilation requirements. This QR code is for the Lemanco's vent calculator, okay? Lemanco's their default is set to 1 to 300. I'll explain what that means in a second, versus 150. And then this QR code, that's how I did this. I use a program that's called Roofr, R-O-F-F-R, and I use it because for like $3, I can get a very high quality image, a near map image that I can then draw on, and I just trace it like it's a flat roof, call this a facet, and that's how I know the attic square footage. But I'm also have to understand the house, because look, this part was not part of it, because I knew, having been in that house, that was a separate attic connected to the garage. So this is down here is like a second attic. But I was like, all right, this is 4032. I plugged that number into this calculator, and said, if I'm going to use these vents, I need 7 of them. And if I'm going to use an 8, these are all 4 by 16, 6 by 16, 8 by 16, all the kind of your 3 standard soffit vents. I would need 16 of these. They each are 65 NFA. So that's how I calculated the 1 in 300. And so all it is saying for every 4,000, for every 300 square feet of attic floor, for every 300 you need 1 square foot of attic ventilation. But all the vents are rated in square inches. So I know, so it's fun. So you got to do some math, or you just use the calculator. But here's how I would do that. So 4032, right, divided by 300, 13.44. That's square feet. So to get to square inch, how do you get from square feet to square inches? What do you multiply by? 144. Okay, so times 144. So I need 1,935 square inches, but that's total. So that's intake and exhaust. So I divide that by 2 and say, all right, 967. If I divide that by 144, 6.72 vents. So that's why I got 7, and you always round up. So that's the math behind it. I'm not saying, that's kind of next level stuff. And I have another like Google sheet I use that I actually plug it all into to tell me if I did this kind of vent and this kind of soffit, how I would get there. But that's kind of the math behind it. But I wanted to just go through this because it's interesting. The 1 for 150 is basically double that. So instead of 7 vents, I need 14. Instead of 16 intake, I need 32. It's like, wait, so you're saying I need 7 or 14? Like, that seems like a big leap. How do we figure that out? How do we get there? And it's really climate. It's kind of roof dependent, climate zone dependent. Do you guys all do you think about your climate zone? Where you are. I mean, we got moist, dry, and marine climates, right? You got a little bit of 1, 2A. So Matt's down here in Houston 2A. They've now made Dallas 2A, which is wild. We're not as bad as you guys. And Tampa, like how did we get lumped with you guys? But depending on the humidity in the climate, the temperatures, it impacts some of what the code says and some of the ways you make your decisions. So again, I'll have a QR code at the end so you can download this whole presentation. But just to kind of go through, in a hot, humid zone, you're prioritizing heat relief, maximum intake plus exhaust, flush out that superheated attic air. You don't need an interior vapor barrier. I'll talk about that when we get to the cold climates. You at least want 1 to 300. It'd be great to get 150 if possible. Seal the ceiling ductwork leaks to limit condensation. That'd be good. Ensure soffits are open, unobstructed. Use roof edge intake vents if there's no overhangs. So, and the other thing, the way I think about it too is it does depend on the pitch. So if you had, let's call it a 12-12 roof, steep, or 312, which one would you want more ventilation for? The steep one? Steep, a lot more air, maybe 312, less air. What? Who thinks you would need it for the lower pitched roof? How many vote for the steep roof? So it really is the lower pitched roof. And why? Because when you have a steep roof, you have something on your side. You have stack effect. You have that natural movement, right? That temperature difference that creates pressure change, which causes better airflow. As you get less, you don't get that working for you. So you really have to get more airflow. And then that's where you get into needing more. If you still have a 312 attic that's vented, then having active helps. And maybe you even consider a fan at that point because it's just going to trap a lot of air, okay? So, and that's true across really all climate zones, but I thought I'd chat about it here. So then hot, dry, 2B to 5B, main goal, cooling the attic, just get that heat out. Lower risk for moisture, 1 to 300 is usually sufficient. Watch for dust, wildfire embers. consider ember-resistant vents. I don't have a slide of this, but there's a vent called the O'Hagan fire and ice vent that is, so those little eyebrow vents that we saw earlier, those are the deck air, those are rated for 36 NFA. The O'Hagans, even their fire and ice vent is rated for like 65 NFA, and it's the same idea, but instead of cutting a slit in the deck, you cut a hole in the deck. But beyond that, it's rated for fire embers. So the mesh that's in those vents is 1/8 inch. It has a fire stopping material in it. And so that's gonna be, and so when I use those in areas that don't require them, I at least tell them, hey, and the good news is you've got safer vents because fire embers can travel like 3 miles. And the fire ember that's traveled 3 miles and lands on your roof, is that gonna catch your house on fire? No. It's the fire ember that travels 3 miles and goes in your soffit and lands up in your attic that's gonna catch your house on fire. So depending on your fire risk, having those kind of vents, in some places it's becoming mandatory, but it's just something to be aware of. And the key is that 1/8 inch mesh. So if you see someone in a zone like that and you have a gable vent with these giant mesh, that's also a big problem. Mixed humid, temperate, both, so 3C to 5A, balance both heat and seasonal moisture. 1 in 300 is okay with a balanced system. Use 1/150 if air barrier vapor control is questionable. Ensure soffit baffles prevent insulation from blocking intake. Inspect attics regularly for mold or condensation. Cold, you really want, in a cold climate, you would want to get that 1/150 unless you have to have at the ceiling, one, you'd want to be sure you're well air sealed at the ceiling, but you need like a vapor retarder. So that's like craft-faced bats counts as that. So if you have, for insulation, craft-faced bat and the craft-faced papers against the deck, that you would need that to be able to do the 1 to 300. Otherwise, you need to do the 1/150. So that's in those colder climates. All right, any other questions about ventilation before we go to kind of our last little bit here? Can you overventilate? I mean, yeah, at some point there's a diminishing return, right? I mean, you're getting, we want to get enough. I think the trouble is finding the sweet spot. How do we make sure we have enough to clear in our climate for this roof, for this, and that gets really technical. How much sunlight does the roof get? And really, we have to use these general rules, but if you're going to get really drilled down and specific on a house, you're trying to think about how, really the building science of it. But I think, yeah, you certainly wouldn't want to put just, instead of 1/150, let's go to 1/75. I mean, there's a point where I think you're getting way too much air in. And then in certain climates too, like in humid climates, there's a little bit of a debate about that because one of the things that causes ductwork to sweat, so it's kind of a separate system, a separate issue, but you can get sweating ductwork just by getting the outside humid air running past it can cause some duct sweating. So there's some trade-offs, and you have to make sure if you're a well-ventilated attic in Tampa, Florida, better have really good separated ductwork, well-insulated, because, we're smart down here. We run our ductwork through our hot attics, yeah.
When you were talking about calculating ridge vents or your outlets versus your intake,
Right.
And rounding up on the soffit vents.
Sure.
Is there a ratio? Obviously, it makes sense rounding up a little bit. Can you overdo it? Is there an issue with having too much intake?
The recommended is 60/40.
Okay.
60/40. So if you said you'd want a little bit more. If you were going to design it perfectly, you'd find out what is the total amount required, and then you'd say, I want 40% of that at the top and 60% of that at the bottom.
Right.
Now, why is that? I don't know that it's necessarily just the physics of it, because sometimes what I suspect is that, that's what the ventilation guys will say. You'll see, they said that's what you want to do. But part of me wonders, is there a little bit of the, engineers like to over-engineer for a good purpose, right? So let's shift gears and think back to my ring shank nails. I want a ring shank nail every 4 inches on the deck, and it doubles the uplift capacity of the deck. Does that mean that every nail has to hit fully and embed perfectly in the rafter for that to work? Or is there a margin of error they're assuming? Oh, they're gonna miss a few, right? So maybe you need it every 8 inches or 9 inches, but in order for that to result, we're gonna tell them every 4, and that way we know that we'll get one every 8, right? So I think the same thing is true with intake. It's really easy to go in an attic and look up and go, oh yeah, I can see all of the exhaust. I see all the openings. It's really hard to make sure all of the intakes are working because the framing gets in the way sometimes. The baffles, I think you have a much greater chance of obstruction at the intake. So is the 60-40 more a safety thing, or is it a true physics stack effect thing? I don't know. Smarter people than me probably know the answer to that, but I think that's just the general rule, is that it's okay to have more intake than exhaust. And I think it just goes back to the funny thing of when people think I need better attic ventilation, they almost never think of intake. They always think of exhaust, which is why there's a market for, these power vents. Now, there's some new powered soffit vents, which is kind of interesting. They make a solar, like the deck air that you see a lot on these roof deck intake vents, but they're powered soffit, or they're powered intake with solar. I'm not inclined to think that's a terrible idea, because you're pulling. Well, if you have to have your math right. Let's say you had that and you had passive vents up top, but you're just creating a little bit of flow. I don't know. It's interesting. Steve Patrick is this sort of roofing guru, and I don't know if he's getting paid or if he's just schlepping the product, but he's been bragging about it. You never know. I mean, I'm open to it, but.
I was thinking 60-40.
Yeah.
One reason I would think is because of different temperatures. Because, in a hot summer day,
Yeah.
the turbines are going to be spinning because of the pressure that's being pushed out.
Right.
So you're going to need more intake.
True.
And at night, they're going to be turning a lot slower.
Yeah.
You're going to have less pressure, so you don't need as much.
Yeah.
That's just my theory on it.
Yeah, that's a good theory. Yeah.
I was told you would also get acceleration that way, right? Because anytime you run fluid through a wedge,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So it's just helping to create flow.
Yeah, so just kind of getting into some fluid dynamics there. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Awesome. So the way I thought we'd wrap up here, we've got about 18 minutes till we're supposed to be finished, but what time's the closing thing? It is at 4:30, so we got to get out a little early. So I'm going to go through this in a minute, but we have a question. Yes? Two? Yes, sir.
You're looking at an open carcass garage, and there's nothing in it, no ceiling finish, no insulation. Does that have to be ventilated?
No, so a garage with no,
Open soffit, open ceiling, nothing's just open carcass.
yeah. I would think it's still, Mark, what's your thought?
No, in Louisiana, you have to ventilate garages now. You have to put.
Even if there's no ceiling even, but that's what he's saying,
So
there's no ceiling, it's just a garage, and then it goes,
a drywall garage, you need to put vents in the garage doors now,
okay.
the bottom of the door.
But do you know if you have to put vents, the attic, yeah.
Are those flood vents in the door you're talking about?
What's the air vent?
Oh, okay, because I know in
It's made to ventilate a garage.
Okay.
Is that for carbon monoxide?
Sometimes they put them inside of the bottom course of the garage door panels.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's in the brickwork or the stucco on the side of the garage or something. But there's little square vents, 1 foot by, 18 inches or something.
Yeah, interesting. So we don't know the answer, but thank you for asking. And,
It'd get really hot in there.
yeah,
Commonly in Canada, we see a lot more, close-held spray foam on the belly of the beast,
yeah,
turning it into a conditioned space.
right,
Does that have to be ventilated?
correct.
We've got fights with builders that say it doesn't because it's conditioned, and
Now, if you look at a passive, system coming from the second floor, first floor, bungalow, whatever it is, coming from the house up there, turning it into a conditioned space, that you don't have to ventilate that roof or not?
Yeah, so the question has to do with spray foam on the roof deck?
Yeah, the underneath.
Underneath, so you're basically creating a conditioned attic?
Correct.
Yeah. So a conditioned attic is an unvented, you shouldn't vent a conditioned attic. So,
Nothing coming from the main part of the house. There's no passive, there's no flow of it, there's no vent work up there, there's vent work.
right.
But nothing active into that space, making it a conditioned space. You still got pipe, sweat, this, that, the other thing.
So what's up in this, so it's encapsulated but not conditioned?
What do you call it? What's the definition of condition?
Are you adding any
You got to have a.
supply, are you adding supply vent or
Supply comes through a hole, possibly through the roof of,
you're a leaky seal, you're saying through like the ceiling penetrations or an intentional supply vent?
an intentional pass through from the conditioned space of the second floor, first floor.
Yeah.
To the attic space. It's still encapsulated, and they say you don't have to ventilate that.
Right. I wouldn't ventilate, no,
Block off all ventilation.
what's your comment? Yeah.
Yeah, if you can foam the underside of that deck, so that attic now is, so you have a hot roof, that attic needs to be conditioned, and that would be an interior heating and cooling vent. There has to be some air movement from that cavity of that attic into the main house. You can't just have dead air up there.
Right, but you're not gonna put like,
Not outside.
not outside air, but yeah, that has to be addressed. Yeah,
Up in there, then you get into fireproofing of the foam, depending on exactly what attic and
Sure.
accessibility you have those rules.
yeah. Yeah, one of the challenges in what we do and what you guys see more than even I do, since you're looking at every system, is that we start getting ahead in one area and the other trades haven't caught up, and it's challenging, So, we run into, in Texas, we use open cell foam, which is vapor open, and when we re-roof those houses, the top of that ridge is rotted out. Because that vapor drives through the foam, hits that OSB, and just sits there, And so people, they're like, oh, but my attic's cooler. It's like, yeah, but it's still humid. You haven't dried it, you've just cooled it, and you haven't helped your moisture load, and where's it going? And so we're running it, and then all the asphalt shingle manufacturers hate spray foam. So they won't warranty roofs that are spray foam. So you get into now a more complex roof assembly where you're creating like a top vented roof and 2 layers of decking. I mean, there's a lot of challenges that, as we're foaming decks.
So I have to go back to building sciences.
Yeah,
It's so technical now, you can't do one thing without affecting something else.
absolutely. Yeah.
I was gonna refer him to bsc.com, so that's something I follow because I,
What is it, Doctor?
bsc.com, which is buildingscience.com, I'm very large.
Oh, buildingscience.com? Yeah. Yeah.
The gentleman talked about it. The origin of ventilation is because we couldn't technically keep the indoor air from flowing into the attic. So we accepted that through lights, through fans, through penetration, the indoor air was going to find its way to the attic. So we said, you know what? Since all that warm air or air differential is going to find its way to the attic, then let's ventilate it. But as soon as you could theoretically keep that thing air from getting into the attic, you don't need to ventilate. So that's why if you're able to use a closed cell and then in the attic and then you're blocked off completely, then you don't need to ventilate. So there is a teaching on BSC.com. It's called to ventilate or not to ventilate.
Right.
That's where you can see that.
But if you use closed cell and you got a leak, it's gonna stay and you'll never find it.
Well, the thing about that is all things being equal. Like now, if you start to penetrate into the problems that could come in and out, yes, there's always something that can go wrong. But from the science point of view,
Yeah.
assuming everything goes constant, if you don't have indoor air space finding its way into the attic and you're using closed cell spray foam, you don't need to ventilate. You're not
Where
gonna
you,
get
where you, where you putting the closed cell on the attic floor or down?
all round, so put on the ceiling all round, because you're not getting, there's no movement of it.
So he's talking about doing, you're talking about, if the attic is fully sealed.
Correct.
Yeah. Then you don't need to condition it or ventilate it, right? So, there's a lot of, Joe Stiebrick and buildingscience.com, He hates vented attics and vented crawl spaces and all that. We have a lot of, but in the real world that I live in, where I'm inheriting a bunch of vented attics, I'm going to figure out how to do it right. And then if they're doing spray foam and open cell, especially in retrofit, they don't understand it, and then they don't condition it right. So there's a lot of challenges, and a lot of that's going to be very climate specific, what you guys are dealing with, and the skill level of, the problem with spray foam, if I'll just diatribe on that for a second, is you think, what product in your home, other than spray foam, are you literally manufacturing in the field? I mean, concrete, but we're pretty good at that. But we also screw that up. But you're manufacturing it. Like, how many, you're familiar with Huber Zipboard, right? Y'all know Zipboard. What if this was the pitch for Zipboard? All right, we're gonna deliver OSB to your job site, and then we have buckets, and we have a little film, and your crew, between this narrow band of temperature and with no direct sunlight, they roll it on and they put the zip, like, what if they had to make the Zipboard in the field? And you'd be like, that's insane. Well, that's what spray foam is. It's like it's got to be at the right temperature. It's got to be at the right pressure. It has to mix right. They have to know what surface temperature is. Do I do a flash pass? I mean, it's so complicated. And it's like, well, people can learn and do great stuff. Yes, they can. But one of the problems is, we were talking about this. Wait, Matt or Tom? Yeah, Matt. Y'all meet Matt and Tom, the young guys from Connecticut, brothers. So Matt, what did we say last night? Show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. So what's the incentive for spray foamers? Here's your $100,000 rig, your $100,000 truck. You know how often I need you spray foaming to make that a profitable business? A lot. So it's all about speed. And it's not at the right temperature, let's not do it they're not incentivized, and then they're competing with guys that are racing to the bottom with them. So spray foam is, mainly it's because I get called, since I do performance testing too, I'm getting called when it's gone wrong and when there's mold issues in the house. So, I'm not anti-spray foam at all. I just think it's a slippery, tricky deal to deal with.
When the house catches on fire too, and you have a lot of spray foam, that can be.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and they're not doing the intimesic coatings on the foam, and they still have 80% furnace. There's a lot of mistakes that get made. It's kind of scary. So let me just go through this real quick, and then I'll try to let y'all, and then if anyone wants to hang out and talk building science, I could do that all day. All right, I just wanted to show you, this is an example of, realtor calls me, hey, my buyer, the inspector went out, flagged the roof for some issues. Oh, it was funny. The seller had done a pre-listing inspection because it was it was part of an estate. And they said, we think it needs a new roof. The seller said they think it's going to probably need a new roof. The buyer's inspector went out and said, oh no, the roof's fine. And she said, will you go look? Because I'm just confused. So this was my report after looking. All right. I use a lot of, this little thing, by the way, just some of y'all that are looking for different hacks, this Plaud, P-L-A-U-D, Plaud pen, Plaud note pen. This is what I've been using. It's an AI note taker. So it fully transcribes everything I've just been talking about. And when we're done, in 5 minutes, I can have a complete summary of everything we've talked about. Okay? And it has templates, and you can build templates. And so I do the inspection template, and then I drop it into ChatGPT, where I've built a template to say, ChatGPT, here's the things I want to hit in an inspection. If I miss these, ask me questions about it. And then when we put the report out, do all these things. And so that's what generated some of all this, like. You're just narrating as you're doing it? Yeah, I'm narrating as I'm taking pictures in Company Cam, which is my photo report app. All right, so then it gave me this. And then that summary from this going into ChatGPT. Again, y'all can download this. But, all right, I'm looking here at the roof. I was already seeing, it's hard to see here, but these shingles at the edge, okay, we're curling, I don't like that. And then I get on there and immediately, I don't pull hard. If I can easily lift a shingle, it's no longer sealed. That's hail damage. And then there was this hailstorm recently, a few months before, so, all right.
You ever do the white chalk on it when you do a 10 by 10 square?
Yeah.
It's more commercial, they do it that
No, we do that for residential too, but yeah. Here I'm just marking it, you know, quickly. You know, there's a little erosion from lack of gutters. Then I talk about flashing penetrations. Here's our, I couldn't get in this attic, but there you go, rusty. I'm gonna call that out. They've got an issue with their furnace. More rusted flashing on something else. You know, these are just things I'm flagging. Here, I pulled up, did the square footage to see, okay, this house is not a bad candidate for ridge vent, right? Nice long ridges, but on this main section, all they have is 2 open gable vents and ridge vent. There's no soffit vents. On here, there were just soffit vents for this little section. And then, you know, if you see something, say something. I'm like, oh, yeah, you're gonna get some critters in there, some safety observations, you know, holes in the soffit, gutters pulling away. And there's my disclaimer. Okay, so I just wanted y'all to see, that's kind of when I get the handoff, I do that. But a lot of these are things that you guys could call out too, to some degree. And it's like, you know, and if not, make sure when you say a qualified roofer, here's a list of 3 I know that are vetted or they're licensed or they're certified with the manufacturer. You know, people will trust, they're not gonna go, most people aren't going on their roof. So they need someone to trust, they're trusting you. Hopefully you can give them more information and then do an appropriate handoff.
So how do we get on the fortified list?
So go to Fortified, just go to fortifiedhome.org and it's like, there are some links in there, like become a fortified evaluator. And then, where are you? Cincinnati. So if you will, again, my Instagram on the left, that's a link tree. I've got several links where I've got the presentation. I'm gonna put a few other things up there. That's my cell number, my email address. Y'all are welcome to reach out to me. And if you, especially on Fortified, if you're interested in that, what I would do is connect you with the guy that I use. There's a company called Pilot, and they have a program where they send out like independent adjusters, but they have a Fortified program too. And so when I need an evaluator, I send Jody Stanley at Pilot an email and say, connect him with my homeowner, and he finds the evaluator, but he also needs more evaluators. So that would be somebody, if you were a Fortified evaluator, you could get connected with him. He does it all over the country.
And the evaluators need to show up the day it's going on, right? Because it's that you're evaluating them all of the elements.
So what they let us do, and I'd like to hear their experience, but what we do is, because I use Company Cam for my pictures, which are time-stamped, geotagged, I'm documenting. They still want the evaluator to come out, and usually comes out the day of, when all the materials have dropped, and gets all those photos and gets a few of his own pictures. And then I am in real time, the evaluator and then Jody, who's actually overseeing it, they're seeing all of our pictures in real time being uploaded. And if they see an issue, they'll say something. So the evaluator for mine never has to come back out, you know, but yeah. And so if y'all want to text me, email me, whatever, if you want information about that. And really anything we've talked about, if I can help you in any way, I'd be happy to.
Fiberglass, or you start seeing the fiberglass matting as the shingle gets into its teenage years, granular loss.
Right.
Just consider normal wear and tear as it's aging. Do you say anything more, or should we be aware or say anything more about that?
You know, I've seen, like, how old a shingle are you talking about?
Well, we never know exactly, but
Yeah.
I've kind of estimated that that's on an early of 13, but usually probably 15, 18 years
Yeah.
old. They're starting to have a granular loss right on the edges. And
Yeah.
you can see that shininess just from the street looking at that house when you get up on the roof. You know, you'll see it even more clearly.
Where are you? What market?
In Maryland.
In Maryland. Yeah, the one thing you gotta be, and maybe it's another thing to advise your client, figure out, and like you said, I want all the information from the seller. You need to, if you can figure out the age of the roof, you know, you wanna figure that out. These days, you kind of with Google Earth, a lot of times you can go back and figure out when it was re-roofed. But the worst thing that can happen is you guess, you don't say anything, and then they file a claim on that later. I had a asphalt shingle roof that for a buddy of mine, and he was flipping the house, but you know, the roof came up in the inspection. I was like, oh, there's hail damage all over this, David. Let's file a claim. They came out, they're like, well, we'll pay for the roof, but it's so old we can't, and it was like probably 10 years old, 12 years old. His agent didn't put an age of the roof. So they put the age of the roof since 1965, the year the house was built. And so he didn't get any money because they had it too old. So the older the roof, the less insurance is going to pay out. So I always I said, if your agent is asking you a question, I said, you know, guess as young as you can defend. It's like, well, I've lived here for, you know, the other people, they said it was replaced before them. Well, they've lived here 5 years, it's 6 years old. I mean, you know, because it's not your job to document the age of the roof, you know, and so you always wanted to see it as young as possible. But anyway, well, I know we're out of time. Thanks, y'all. Hope this was helpful. If there's any, yeah, appreciate it.